The house stood at the edge of the cliff, where the sea whispered secrets to the wind and the fog seemed to linger a little longer than it should have. The paint had long since peeled from its shutters, and vines clung to the walls like hands that refused to let go. It looked like the kind of place you'd see in a painting, beautiful, lonely, haunted. I stepped out of the taxi, the cool coastal air brushing against my cheeks like a forgotten memory. The driver didn't wait for small talk. Just dropped my suitcase on the gravel and drove off with a nod, as if he too wanted to get away from this place before the mist swallowed him whole. This house was supposed to be mine. Left to me in the will of a grandmother I barely remembered, a woman with silver hair and a faraway voice, like a lullaby heard through a wall. After the accident, after the hospital and the weeks of confusion and blank pages in my memory, the house was all that was left. My name was on the deed. My belongings were in storage. My life, whatever it had once been, was paused somewhere between who I was and who I was now. Lyra. That was still my name. But it felt like it belonged to someone else. I gripped the brass key the lawyer had given me, its edges cold and unfamiliar. The front door creaked as I pushed it open, groaning as if in protest. Dust danced in the faint light. The scent of old wood, sea salt, and something faintly floral hit me all at once. Jasmine. Or maybe lavender. Familiar. Too familiar. The house didn't feel empty. It felt paused. A coat still hung on the rack by the door. An old record player sat silently in the corner, a vinyl still resting on its platter. The wallpaper curled at the edges, water-stained in places. A photograph on the wall caught my eye, sepia-toned, blurred at the edges, a woman with long hair standing beside a man whose face had faded from time or sun. I leaned closer. The woman wore a locket around her neck. I touched my throat, suddenly breathless. I didn't know why I was crying. The living room was dim, lit only by the soft grey light filtering through lace curtains. I wandered, fingertips brushing dusty surfaces, the weight of forgotten things pressing on my chest. There was a fireplace stone, solid, and above it, a crooked mirror. My own reflection startled me. Same brown eyes. Same scattered freckles. Same half-healed scar near my temple. But the look in my eyes, that wasn't me. Or not the me I remembered. I moved upstairs next, the floorboards groaning beneath my steps. The hallway was lined with closed doors, bedrooms, maybe a study. I stopped before the one at the end. The doorknob was different. Brass, like the key. I turned it. The room was cold. Windows covered in sheer curtains. An unmade bed. A single chair by the window, facing the sea. And a journal. It rested on the windowsill like it had been left there just minutes ago. I picked it up. My hands trembled. The cover was worn leather, the initials LS etched faintly in the corner. Lyra Sinclair. My name. I opened it. Blank pages. All of them. Except the very last one. He promised we'd never be apart. But the sea keeps secrets, and this house remembers everything. Even the love we tried to forget. No date. No signature. I closed the journal slowly, a chill running down my spine. The wind picked up outside, howling against the windows. And then, something strange. A sound. A soft, distant click, like a music box winding itself. I froze. Listened. There it was again. Soft and melodic. Notes drifting from somewhere downstairs. But there was no one else here. Was there? I backed out of the room, clutching the journal to my chest, heart hammering against my ribs. Every step down the hallway felt like walking deeper into a dream I'd had once, one I couldn't quite remember, but had never truly forgotten. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the dim hallway below. And for just a second, I saw him. A man standing in the entryway, face shadowed, coat wet with rain. He looked up at me with something between sorrow and hope. But when I blinked, he was gone. I didn't expect the house to feel like this. Not warm. Not comforting. Not like a place meant to be mine. Just familiar in a way that made my skin tighten and my breath catch. It stood there at the cliff's edge, tall, weather-worn, and beautiful in the way sad things often are. The sea stretched beyond it, quiet and endless, while mist curled around the shingles like it belonged there. The taxi didn't linger. The driver barely muttered a goodbye before driving off, tires crunching down the gravel drive, leaving me and my suitcase in the cold silence. The wind bit through my sweater as I looked up at the house, the one I inherited from a grandmother I don't remember, the one that's supposed to be my fresh start. But the second I stepped toward the porch, I knew. This house remembered something about me. Even if I didn't. I gripped the brass key the lawyer gave me and slid it into the old lock. It stuck for a moment before turning with a reluctant click. The door groaned open like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the air was still. Dust hung in thin streams of light. It smelled like old wood, sea salt, and something floral. Jasmine, maybe. Or lavender. I wasn't sure, but it stopped me mid-step. Why did it smell like my dreams? I stepped into the foyer, suitcase trailing behind me. A coat still hung on the rack. A framed painting tilted slightly on the wall. There were signs of life, of someone having been here once and not long ago. My fingers brushed over the table by the door, the wood smooth beneath a layer of dust. A chill ran down my arms. The living room was dim, lit only by weak light through yellowed lace curtains. There was a fireplace, and above it, a crooked mirror. My reflection caught me off guard. Brown eyes, faint freckles, the scar near my temple. The scar I got from the accident they say I'm lucky to have survived. Lucky. That's what they told me. Funny how lucky feels so much like lost. I turned away, unsure why my throat suddenly burned. Wandering room to room, I found traces of someone else everywhere. A worn record player in the corner, an open book left face down on a table, a teacup with a crack running through it sitting alone in a cabinet. I didn't remember this place. But it remembered me. The creaking stairs led me up to a narrow hallway, lined with closed doors and peeling wallpaper. I stopped at the last door on the left. The handle was different brass, warm against my palm. The room beyond it was quiet. A little too quiet. Sheer curtains covered the windows, casting pale light across the room. There was a bed, unmade. A single chair by the window, angled to face the sea. And on the windowsill, like it had been waiting for me, sat a small leather journal. I crossed the room slowly, heart thudding as I reached for it. The cover was soft, well worn. The initials etched into the corner made my breath catch. LS. My initials. I opened it. The pages were empty. All of them. Except the very last one. Just a single line in faded ink. He promised we'd never be apart. But the sea keeps secrets, and this house remembers everything. Even the love we tried to forget. No date. No name. Just those words. And they sent a strange ache through my chest. I closed the journal with trembling fingers, staring out the window as waves crashed silently below. My head pulsed. A memory tried to surface, and then slipped away like water through my hands. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, delicate, haunting. Music. Notes drifting up from downstairs. I froze. I hadn't turned anything on. I hadn't touched the record player. I crept back down the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The music grew louder. Familiar. A melody I couldn't name but somehow knew. And then I saw him. For a single heartbeat, there was a man in the entryway. Soaking wet. Head tilted up toward me. Eyes filled with something, grief? Hope? I blinked, gasped. And he was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Just the empty silence of a house that didn't feel empty at all. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, journal still clutched in my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't know who he was. But something inside me whispered that I once loved him. And that this house was where it all ended. I didn't sleep. I tried. I curled beneath the thick, moth-scented blankets in the upstairs bedroom, stared at the cracked ceiling, listened to the wind scratching at the windows. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. That music. That man. That look. I kept telling myself it was just stress, a side effect of the memory loss, maybe even a hallucination. But deep down, beneath all the logic and fear, I knew he was real. Or at least, had been once. When I woke to rain tapping against the windows and grey light bleeding through the curtains, the house felt different. Not quieter, but expectant. Like it was holding its breath. Downstairs, I made tea I couldn't taste and stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the storm move in across the cliffs. The sea thrashed beneath the fog like it, too, was restless. I felt it echo in my bones. At some point, I wandered into the study, small, cramped, the air thick with dust and old paper. There were bookshelves lining the walls, filled with novels, diaries, weathered atlases, and strangely a collection of old letters tied together with faded ribbon. Most were blank envelopes, yellowed with age. But one in the stack wasn't sealed. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. My dearest Lyra. I saw you again today. Not in the flesh, but in the space between sleep and morning, in that hush where memory slips through like light beneath a door. You were laughing. You always laugh before you cry. And then you vanished again. I keep the porch light on, just in case. In case the sea gives you back. In case love does. Underscore. It wasn't signed. But the ink looked recent. Too recent. My heartbeat stuttered. This wasn't a dream. Someone had been writing to me. Someone still was. I stuffed the letter back into the bundle and dropped it like it burned. That's when I heard the knock. I froze. My breath caught. It was soft, steady 3 taps. I walked to the door slowly, half expecting no one to be there at all. But when I pulled it open, the breath in my lungs turned to mist. He stood there. Soaked through. Hair plastered to his forehead. Eyes like thunderclouds, deep, dark, stormy, with something I didn't understand but felt. Recognition. Longing. Grief. And me? I just stood there, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding me to the earth. Lyra, he said. His voice was hoarse. Like he hadn't spoken that name in years. Like it hurt him to say it aloud. Yes, I answered, though it sounded more like a question than a truth. He stared at me, eyes wide, mouth parted in disbelief. It's you. It's really you. I stepped back instinctively. I think you have the wrong person. No, he said quickly, stepping into the doorway as the rain spilled in behind him. No, God, I thought I'd lost my mind. They said you were dead. That you drowned. That the fire. The fire. He stopped. His chest rose and fell sharply. You don't remember? I shook my head slowly. I had an accident. A few months ago. I don't remember much from before. Just fragments. Silence swelled between us. He looked like he'd been punched. Do I know you? I asked, voice barely a whisper. His lips parted. Then closed. He ran a hand through his wet hair and stepped back like he suddenly realized how fragile I was, how broken. My name is Rowan, he said finally. I lived here. With you. My breath caught. My fingers curled against the door frame. You're saying we? He nodded once. We were in love. Until you vanished. Until the house caught fire and they said you were gone. Gone. The word struck something inside me. Like a pebble falling into a deep well. The ripples came slowly. I don't remember, I murmured. I don't remember any of that. He closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them again, wet with more than just rain. I kept coming back. Every year on the same day, hoping his voice broke. You were my beginning and my end, Lyra. I never stopped waiting. A storm rolled in behind him. Thunder cracked, distant but rising. And inside me, something cracked too. A memory. Just a flicker. His face, close to mine. Laughter. The smell of smoke. The sound of waves crashing as someone screamed my name. Rowan. It came like a whisper inside my skull. Rowan, I said aloud, tasting the name. His eyes snapped to mine. Hope sparked. Before I could stop myself, I stepped aside. Come in. Rowan stood in the entryway like he'd stepped out of a storm and into a memory his, not mine. He dripped rainwater onto the floorboards, but neither of us noticed. I watched him like you'd watch a ghost who didn't know it had died. He looked around slowly, taking in the house with the quiet reverence of someone visiting a grave. His fingers brushed the doorframe, the edge of the mirror, the old coat still hanging by the wall. He touched everything with care, as though it might vanish if he pressed too hard. "This house hasn't changed," he murmured, almost to himself. "Except it feels quieter now. Like it forgot how to breathe." I didn't know what to say. I was still reeling. I led him into the living room where the fireplace sat cold and unused. He hesitated near the mantel, then knelt beside it like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Watching him felt intimate in a way I didn't understand. Like we had once lived an entire life together that my mind had carefully erased. "Do you really not remember anything?" he asked finally, turning toward me. I wrapped my arms around myself. "Only pieces. Feelings. Sometimes in dreams. But nothing solid. Just fragments." He nodded slowly. "You used to write letters. Dozens of them. You said they helped you hold on to the parts of yourself you were afraid to lose. That struck me like a tuning fork against bone. I had been a girl afraid of forgetting?" He stood, brushing dust from his jeans. "There used to be a loose brick in the fireplace. Right side. You used to hide things there." That startled something in me. Without thinking, I dropped to my knees beside the hearth. The stone was cold beneath my fingers. I ran my hand along the edge of the bricks, pausing where one felt ever so slightly recessed. I pressed it. It shifted with a soft click. Heart pounding, I pulled it loose. Behind it was a hollow space, and inside, folded and yellowed, was a single letter tied with a blue ribbon. My hands shook as I untied it. The paper was delicate, the ink slightly faded, but the handwriting. It was mine. "Rowan. If you're reading this, it means I forgot again. Or maybe you're the one who forgot. Maybe we both did. This house, it's where I loved you once. Where I lost you once. Where I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again. But if time has stolen the memory from me, let this letter be the lighthouse. Find me. Remind me. Love me back to the beginning. _ I couldn't breathe. Rowan knelt beside me, his eyes scanning the words with a mix of reverence and heartbreak. "You wrote this," he whispered. "After the first fire." I looked at him, dazed. There was more than one. He didn't answer. His eyes were damp. His voice cracked. "You used to say this house was alive. That it held on to things for us. Love. Grief. Promises." I looked around. And for the first time, I saw it differently. Not just a house. A vessel. A witness. A keeper of things lost and returned. A breeze swept through the open doorway behind us, and the old music box on the side table played a single note, just one. But it was enough to raise goosebumps across my skin. "I dreamed of you," I whispered. "Before I ever came here. I didn't know it was you then. But now." He turned to me, his voice rough. "Do you believe it now? That we lived something, before?" "I don't know what I believe," I whispered. "But something inside me does." The flames in the fireplace flickered without ever being lit. And somewhere deep in the walls, I swore I heard laughter, soft, echoing, like a memory playing itself over again. He reached for my hand. I let him. His fingers were rough, warm, familiar. Like coming home. After reading the letter, silence settled between Rowan and me like dust on forgotten furniture, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. I clutched the paper to my chest, the ink still warm in my mind even though the words had clearly been written years ago. By me. And yet I had no memory of writing them, no memory of the love that bled from every syllable. But I couldn't deny it anymore. Some part of me remembered him. And that terrified me. Rowan sat across from me on the threadbare sofa, hands steepled, elbows resting on his knees. His eyes searched mine like he was afraid of what he might find. "You said I disappeared," I whispered. He nodded once. 5 years ago. My heart stuttered. How? He hesitated. Looked down. It was the storm. You'd been acting distant for weeks. Writing things down. Saying you could feel something coming. That the house wasn't finished with us yet. I thought it was stress. Your writing always got heavier when the weather changed. But that night. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched. There was a fire. I don't know what caused it. One moment we were arguing, the next the smoke was everywhere. I remember calling your name. Trying to get back upstairs. My stomach turned. And then. I blacked out. They pulled me from the wreckage. His voice dropped. They never found your body. Just ashes. The search teams assumed. He trailed off. That I died, I finished for him. He nodded once, his voice almost inaudible. I mourned you. Everyone did. I stared down at my hands, suddenly unsure who I even was. A woman who'd survived a car accident. Or someone who'd died in a fire and was living on borrowed time. But if I died, I whispered, how am I here? He looked at me, haunted and hopeful. I don't know. But this house, it isn't ordinary, Lyra. It never was. You used to say it remembered things. That time bent differently here. I blinked. That sounds insane. I know. And yet I couldn't deny the signs. The letter in the fireplace. The music box that played without touch. The vivid dreams. His face in those dreams. And now, this. I didn't believe in ghosts. But maybe I believed in something else. In second chances. In places that held on to love too tightly. In the idea that some stories weren't finished the first time. I stood and crossed to the window. Rain dripped slowly down the glass like the house was crying for something it couldn't say out loud. Below, the garden was overgrown, tangled, wild. But nestled near the gate, I saw something strange. Roses. Fresh. 3 of them, bright red, tied with a pale ribbon and left by the door. My breath caught. I didn't put those there, Rowan said behind me. I turned to him. Then who did? His expression darkened. I've come back here every year. Left roses, yes. But never like that. Never this early. And never inside the gate. He joined me at the window, his presence grounding, steady. This house is trying to show us something, he murmured. It's always known more than either of us. The fire. The forgotten love. The dream of drowning. The letter I wrote to myself. And now, the roses placed as if to say I'm still here. Don't forget again. Something was building. Rising like a tide. And I was caught in the middle of it. Rowan, I said slowly, still watching the garden. What if I never left at all? He turned to me. What if some part of me stayed behind? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both felt it, the weight of the house pressing against the windows, whispering from the walls. And when the old clock in the hallway suddenly chimed on its own for the first time since I arrived, we both jumped. 3 slow, heavy bells. Midnight. But it was only 4 in the afternoon. I didn't know if I believed in ghosts. But I knew what I felt. And that night, I felt the house watching me. After the clock chimed 3 deep, deliberate bells at the wrong hour, I didn't speak. Neither did Rowan. We stood there in silence, our eyes locked, hearts loud in our chests. I wound that clock last 5 years ago, he said softly. I nodded. I already knew. Even if I couldn't explain how. We stayed close for the rest of the evening, neither of us quite ready to be alone. He made tea. I lit candles. The power flickered more than once. Rain tapped at the windows like a nervous visitor. I found myself staring at Rowan when he wasn't looking. At the scar just beneath his jaw, the way he stirred his tea clockwise, the small smile he gave when I asked him something ordinary. It was all so familiar. But still, not mine. Not yet. It wasn't until later, after he'd gone to the guest room, that I began to feel the shift. The air changed, first grew warmer, thicker, like something had woken up. I sat in the parlor with a blanket over my shoulders, the journal in my lap. I'd flipped through it again, hoping for more clues, but the pages remained stubbornly blank except for that single line at the end. Find me. Remind me. Love me back to the beginning. I closed my eyes. And the music started again. The old music box, closed and untouched on the side table, played a soft tune that crept into the walls and slid under my skin. Not eerie, more like a lullaby. A melody that once meant comfort. I rose slowly, the candlelight casting gold across the floorboards. Rowan. I called softly. No answer. The hallway was empty, shadows stretching long and deep across the floor. I followed the music, my pulse loud in my ears, into the sitting room at the back of the house. The music grew louder. And then it stopped. Just like that. I turned toward the fireplace, cold, lifeless, and saw something strange. The ashes inside had been disturbed. I stepped closer. Someone had drawn something into the soot. A heart. And within it, the letters R and L. My breath caught. Rowan and Lyra, I whispered. I didn't draw that. I knew Rowan hadn't either. The room suddenly chilled. The candle flickered violently, then went out. I stood in darkness. And then, faintly, just faintly, I heard a whisper. Come back to me. My spine snapped straight. Who's there? I asked, my voice a shaky echo. Silence. And then the sound of footsteps above me. slow, deliberate, directly above the fireplace. I grabbed the candle and fled the room, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. The upper hallway stretched out before me, impossibly long in the candle light. My old bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly. No one. But the window was wide open, curtains billowing wildly. Rain sprayed in, soaking the wooden floor. Wind howled into the space like a living thing. I stepped to the window, trying to close it, when I saw it. A figure in the garden. Not Rowan. A woman. She wore a long dress, and her hair blew loose around her shoulders. She turned to look at me. And vanished. Gone. Just, gone. I stood there shaking, the rain now slicking down my arms, my heart a mess of grief and awe and confusion. I wasn't alone in this house. And I never had been. When I went to wake Rowan, I found him already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with a photo in his hands. It was cracked and faded, but I could see it clearly now. Him. And me. In front of the fireplace. Smiling. Alive. I didn't sleep, he said, eyes still on the photograph. I kept hearing your voice. Calling me. I sat beside him. I think this house is trying to tell us something. He nodded slowly. Or it's trying to finish something it never got to end. Outside, the rain stopped all at once. Just silence. We looked at each other. And in that silence, a memory flickered behind my eyes. Rain falling. A fire spreading. My hand in Rowan's. A promise. If I ever forget, bring me back here. Back to where it all began. The storm rolled in just after dusk. The house groaned under the weight of the wind as rain lashed against the windows. I'd curled up in the reading nook upstairs, wrapped in a blanket, watching the waves crash in the distance. I didn't remember being afraid of storms, but tonight, the atmosphere pressed in tighter like the walls were listening, the wind whispering something I couldn't quite understand. Then the doorbell rang. At first, I thought I imagined it. Who would come all the way up here in this weather? But the chime echoed again, sharp and clear. I hesitated for a heartbeat before padding downstairs, the floorboards creaking beneath me. I pulled the door open slowly. And froze. A man stood on the porch, soaked to the bone. Rain streamed from his hair and dripped off his coat, but his eyes, those familiar eyes, were fixed on me with a stunned expression. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. He took a shaky breath. Lyra. My name in his voice sent a tremor through me. But I didn't recognize him, not truly. He was handsome in a weary, haunted kind of way. Mid-30s, lean frame, a 5 o'clock shadow lining his jaw. But it was the look in his eyes that caught me off guard, like he'd just seen a ghost. I'm sorry, I said cautiously. Do I know you? His face crumbled. He blinked as if steadying himself, then whispered, It's me. Rowan. The name hit me like a thunderclap. The same name from my dreams. From the letters. But that wasn't possible. I think you have the wrong person, I said, taking a half step back. No, he stepped forward, desperation bleeding into his voice. No, I know this looks crazy, but I lived in this house. With you. 5 years ago. Before you disappeared. I stared at him, heart thudding. I was in a car accident a few months ago. I lost most of my recent memory. I don't remember you. His breath caught. A car accident. He looked like the air had been knocked out of him. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head, rain still pouring down around him. You disappeared 5 years ago. Everyone thought you were dead. But I never stopped looking. I swore I saw you once, at a train station, but you vanished before I could reach you. My throat tightened. I don't understand. I think you're being given a second chance, he said, voice cracking. You don't remember me. But I remember everything. The wind howled behind him, lightning illuminating the horizon in violent flashes. I should have closed the door. I should have told him to leave. Instead, I stepped aside and whispered, "Come in." Rowan stood just inside the doorway, dripping water onto the wooden floor. I handed him a towel without a word, and he took it with shaking hands. The silence between us felt like a living thing, thick, confused, tangled with memories I didn't have and emotions I couldn't place. I didn't mean to scare you, he said quietly as he dried his hair. I couldn't believe it when I saw your face. I sat on the edge of the couch, still wrapped in my blanket. You said we lived here. Together. He nodded slowly. We bought this house together. Renovated it ourselves. You always loved the fireplace, the way the light hit in the mornings, the way it crackled at night. You used to fall asleep right there with your head on my chest. I swallowed, throat dry. Why can't I remember any of it? I don't know, Rowan said, his voice thick with pain. One day you went out to get groceries. You never came back. The police searched everywhere. They found your car on a road by the cliffs, but not you. No trace. I looked down at my hands. I woke up in a hospital. They said there'd been an accident, and I had no ID on me. The only thing in my pocket was a locket, with a pressed flower inside. I assumed it was from my grandmother. Rowan's head jerked up. A locket with a white camellia. I nodded, startled. Yes, how did you know? Because I gave it to you. His voice cracked, and he pressed his palms to his face. It was our flower. I pressed a hand to my chest, where the locket still hung beneath my shirt. Something shifted in me, an ache I didn't have words for. I've been having dreams, I admitted softly. Of this house. Of you, maybe. Rainy days by the fire. Music playing. Laughing. Letters I wrote, but can't remember writing. You wrote me letters all the time, Rowan said. Even when we were together. You'd hide them for me to find later. In drawers. Under the floorboards. Once, you put one in the hollow of the tree out back. My breath caught. I found a letter, I whispered. In the fireplace bricks. Last week. Rowan looked at me, eyes glistening. Can I see it? I rose slowly and fetched the folded page from the drawer where I'd hidden it. My hands trembled as I passed it to him. He took it like it was something sacred. When he read it, his face crumpled. "It's yours," he said. "It's your handwriting." "I don't remember writing it," I said. "But I knew when I read it that it was meant for someone I loved." He looked up, voice almost inaudible. "You used to say love wasn't just something you felt. It was something you remembered even when everything else faded." My vision blurred with tears. "Rowan. I want to believe you. I want to remember. I can help you," he said gently. "If you'll let me." The storm outside began to fade. But the one inside me had only just begun. The next morning, the rain was gone, but the air still smelled like yesterday's sorrow. Rowan stayed in the guest room. I hadn't had the strength to send him away. Something about the way he looked at me as if I was both a memory and a miracle kept me from shutting the door. I stood by the kitchen window, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug, watching sunlight pour through the fog. My grandmother's teapot sat on the sill, a vine of ivy curling along the window frame. Everything felt too still, as though the house was holding its breath. "You used to hum in the mornings," Rowan said behind me, his voice hesitant. "Same song every time. You said it made the coffee taste better." I turned slowly. "What song?" He hummed a few notes. The melody prickled against something inside me, a memory just beyond reach. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to follow the thread. "Nothing. I'm sorry," I whispered. "It's like chasing ghosts." He gave a faint smile. "That's what memory is, sometimes." After breakfast, we walked the garden path behind the house. I half expected the wind to speak, or the trees to whisper stories I'd forgotten. When we reached the crooked oak at the end of the trail, Rowan stopped. "This is it," he said. "The hollow I told you about." He knelt at the base of the tree and brushed away moss and damp leaves until a small opening was visible no larger than a curled fist. Reaching in, he pulled out a folded piece of yellowed paper, sealed with wax so worn it had cracked. My chest tightened. "You hid this?" He nodded, offering it to me. "It's yours." My fingers hesitated before peeling it open. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, looping and familiar. But the words? "If I forget you, please find me. If I run, chase me. If I disappear, wait for me here at the place where love was buried but never died." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. The wind blew softly, like breath on my neck. "Lyra," Rowan said, gently touching my arm, "I think a part of you always knew you might lose yourself. Maybe you left a trail for me to find." "I feel like I'm reading a story I wrote but never lived," I choked out. "But my heart remembers you, even if my mind doesn't." We sat beneath the tree, silence swelling between us like a tide. Rowan looked at me not with expectation, but with ache. "You once said this house wasn't just walls and wood. It was a second heartbeat. Ours." I turned toward him slowly. "And if I never get the first heartbeat back?" He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Then we start again with the second." The sunlight streamed through the branches above us, casting shadows like lace. And for the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel like a stranger here. I felt like someone was waiting to come home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter from the hollow lay on my nightstand, its words replaying in my mind like a lullaby written by someone I no longer fully remembered but deeply loved. I traced each curve of my handwriting, trying to understand what kind of woman I had been. Brave? Romantic? Desperate? Or maybe all three? Downstairs, the house creaked like it was remembering something too. Drawn by an ache I couldn't name, I tiptoed to the attic. The same place where I'd found the trunk. My heart beat louder with each step, unsure if I was chasing a ghost or returning to one. The attic air was thick with dust and hush. I knelt by the trunk, pried it open again, and sifted through the contents with new eyes. My eyes. There, beneath old dresses and moth-eaten linens, lay something I hadn't noticed before, a bundle of letters, tied with red thread. My fingers trembled as I untied them. They were all addressed to me. But not to Lyra, exactly. To my love. To you, if you remember. To the woman who once promised me forever. Each was written by Rowan. Letter after letter. I devoured every word. Today, you forgot my name for the first time. But you still asked me if I liked the rain, like we were meeting all over again. I said yes, and you smiled like the sky had opened. You told me that if the day came when you no longer knew me, I had to make you fall in love with me again. You said love like ours doesn't vanish, it just forgets how to find its way back. By the time I reached the last letter, tears blurred the ink. I turned the envelope over. It was unsealed. Inside, one unfinished line. If you find this, it means I've let go of remembering. But maybe. That was it. No more. The rest of the page was blank, as if the past had simply stopped breathing mid-sentence. I clutched it to my chest and curled up in the attic corner. I didn't cry like I had before. This time, I felt something shift, not pain, not loss. Hope. Because no matter how many pieces of myself I'd lost, Rowan had been gathering them, patiently, tenderly, and laying them in my hands. A soft creak came from the attic door. I turned. Rowan stood there, barefoot, holding a candle. You remember anything? He asked gently. I held up the letter. Enough to know I was loved. His throat bobbed. He walked to me and knelt down, brushing his hand over mine. You still are. And in that attic, in the silence between the words we hadn't yet found, I did the one thing that felt true. I kissed him. And it didn't feel like a beginning or an end. It felt like home. The days that followed blurred like watercolors left out in the rain, soft, quiet, and tinged with something unspoken. Rowan stayed. Not as a guest. Not as a stranger. But as someone who remembered what I didn't and never held it against me. He didn't press when I stared at him too long, searching for the familiarity my heart felt even when my mind could not recall it. He just smiled and let me come back to him in my own time. But one night, something shifted. It was storming outside, the sea raging loud enough to shake the glass in the windows. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching lightning tear the sky open, when I saw it again. The woman in white. She stood outside the garden gate, just like before. But this time, she looked up, and she smiled. Not a warning. Not sorrow. But peace. And then, she vanished into the rain. I didn't even feel my legs move. I ran out the back door, barefoot and soaked in seconds, heart pounding. The gate was open. The roses, those same white ones from every night, were lying on the path. Only this time, instead of a note, there was a photograph. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was me. And Rowan. Sitting on the porch steps. My head on his shoulder. We looked like we belonged to each other. And behind us, the house stood whole, newly painted, with blooming roses and light in every window. A memory. A real one. The next morning, Rowan found me curled on the steps, the photograph clutched to my chest. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked softly. I didn't pretend not to know who he meant. "She smiled at me," I whispered. He knelt, brushing rain-matted hair from my face. "Maybe she was the part of you waiting for you to come back." "I think she was the part I left behind," I said. "And she's telling me, it's okay to remember." That day, I opened the last drawer in my grandmother's old writing desk, the one I hadn't dared to touch. Inside was a faded journal with my name etched inside the cover. Not Lyra, but Lyra Ainsley Clark. My full name. And as I turned the pages, memory poured back in pieces, the first time Rowan kissed me beneath the lilac tree. The night I told him about the illness creeping into my mind. The day I made him promise to love me, even when I couldn't remember his name. Even when I forgot who I was. I had written it all down. Because some part of me knew I'd come back. And Rowan, he never gave up. The journal stayed beside my bed, its leather worn and pages fragile, as if it had waited all these years just to be opened by me. Every night I read more until the words weren't just stories but echoes inside me. I began to feel whole, not because I remembered everything perfectly, but because I no longer feared the pieces I had lost. But the house, it wasn't done with its secrets. It happened on a quiet afternoon. The storm had passed, and the air smelled like salt and earth. I was in the bedroom, our bedroom, the one Rowan said we used to share, cleaning beneath the old dresser when something sharp scraped my palm. A tiny splintered floorboard. Curious, I tugged at it and it gave way with a soft groan, revealing a hollow space. Inside was a yellowed envelope, brittle with age. My name was written on the front in my handwriting. But the date on the back made my breath catch. 5 years ago. I sat on the floor and opened it with careful fingers. To the Lyra who forgets. If you're reading this, it means you've found your way back. I don't know what you'll remember. Maybe you'll think you're a stranger in this house, or maybe pieces of me will come in dreams. But know this: what we had was real. Rowan is real. He loves you. He always did. I ran because I was scared not of dying, but of forgetting him. Of forgetting us. If this house still stands, maybe it's because our love is still living in its bones. And maybe you are, too. So fall in love again. With the rain. With the roses. With him. And don't be afraid to stay. Love. You. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear dropped onto the letter and smudged the ink. Outside the window, the garden shimmered under the golden light of evening. That night, I told Rowan everything. About the letter. About the journal. About how the dreams weren't dreams, they were memories, scattered and buried, but still mine. And when I showed him the letter, his eyes didn't water but his hand trembled as he held it. "You wrote this the night you disappeared," he whispered. "I searched everywhere. For you. For a clue. I never thought it would find its way back to me through you." I took his hand and placed it over my heart. "I'm still me," I whispered. "Different. But I'm here." He kissed me like he had the first time. Gently. Slowly. Like a man who had waited 5 years to breathe again. And just like that, I remembered how it felt to be loved not once, but twice in the same lifetime. In the quiet after the storm, the house felt different, as if it had finally taken a deep, cleansing breath. I woke early that morning to soft light filtering through gauzy curtains and a hush that seemed to promise a new beginning. Today, the echoes of the past had softened, the raw edges of memory were slowly aligning into something like hope. Rowan was in the kitchen, quietly humming that familiar tune from our old mornings. I watched him from the doorway, remembering how he once said that our love was like the tide ever returning, even after the hardest of storms. I stepped inside and joined him, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on my face and the gentle reassurance of his steady presence at my side. I knew now that I would never recover every detail of the life I'd lost. But in the fragments that remained, a locket, a handwritten letter, the softness of his eyes, I began to see a tapestry of a love that was resilient and true. The house, with its whispered secrets and hidden letters, had cradled our memories, it had borne witness to joy and heartbreak alike. And somehow, in its own quiet way, it was healing the wounds of the past. Later that day, I found myself wandering through the garden, stepping barefoot among dew-kissed roses and wild ivy. I paused by the crooked oak, our secret meeting place, and pressed my hand against the rough bark. There, in the hollow where once a message had been hidden, I realized that this space was more than just a reminder of what we'd lost, it was a testament to what we could rebuild. In that moment, as light danced over every leaf and petal, I felt an overwhelming certainty: love, once ignited, never truly dies, it transforms, deepening with every beat of the heart. When Rowan joined me, we stood together in quiet understanding, letting the silence speak what words could not. "I'm not sure I'll remember every detail of who we were," I murmured, "but I know I want to remember how it felt to be loved, to be seen, to be whole again." He took my hand gently, and in that simple gesture, I felt the promise of countless tomorrows, a future we would write side by side, not in the echoes of what once was, but in the tender space of new beginnings. As dusk settled, painting the sky with deep purples and soft ambers, the house glowed from within. No longer a repository of painful memories, it had become a sanctuary, a place where every creak in the floor and every whispered note of the wind told a story of resilience and rebirth. I smiled through tears of gratitude, knowing that though I had lost so much, I had also found something irreplaceable: the courage to live, to love, and to let the house heal me. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt lived in, like a place that had held its breath for years and finally exhaled. I stood by the window, watching the sea stretch toward the horizon. The same sea that once separated who I was from who I had become. Now, it simply shimmered in the distance, timeless and calm. Beside me, Rowan wrapped an arm around my waist. There was no longer any need for questions. No more broken timelines or missing pieces. My memories hadn't all returned, but I didn't need them to love him again. I loved him now. In this moment. With this heart. The past had brought us pain, yes. But it had also carried us back to each other. That morning, the house was filled with soft music and the scent of roses. Friends gathered. Laughter spilled through the hallway that had once echoed with silence. And in the garden, beneath that old oak tree, I said yes. Yes to Rowan. Yes to love this time, not forgotten, but chosen. And just before I stepped inside for the celebration, I looked over my shoulder one last time. Toward the house. Toward the girl I used to be. Toward the love we once lost. And I smiled. Because now, I understood. This was not the house where everything ended. It was the house where I loved him twice. And this time, I would never let go. If this story moved you even a little, please like or comment, it helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a love story whispered just for you. We're building something special here, a space for stories that speak to the soul. I'm so glad you're part of it.